What is up, social studies family? Welcome back to the vlog. Welcome back to social studies. Let's get learning. All right, so this is actually lesson 3 of chapter 2 in your book. So we're almost nearing the end of chapter 2 already. And so far, for most of the other chapters, we've been talking about the first people or the native people. And those are the people who were always here and always have been here. Next, we're going to talk about Europeans and the Europeans arriving, the explorers and the early settlers that came from Europe. So it wasn't always easy to live in Europe in the 1500s and 1600s, especially if you were just a normal person. A lot of times you worked 11, 12 hours a day, 7 days a week. There was no such thing as vacations or anything like that. There also just weren't enough jobs for everybody. So if you didn't have a job that worked 12 hours a day, you didn't have a job, and you had to find a way to earn money and make food, and if you didn't have that, you were starving. So many Europeans were looking for a new place to live, a new area to explore, or a new way to get rich. So Europeans began coming to North America in the 1500s. The first to arrive to the North American continent were the Spanish. They came through the 1500s and 1600s, and they would set up a colony. And a colony is just a settlement in a new land where people still remain loyal to their old land. So the Spanish people would come over. They settled a lot in Florida. They would develop a colony, but they were still part of Spain. Other countries to start exploring and settling or developing colonies in North America were the French. They mostly did it in Canada. And the British mostly did it in what we would call New England. That's why they call it New England, because they came from England. But kind of like that Boston, New York, Virginia area, like from the middle of America on the East Coast. And so they were all setting up colonies. Some of the first Europeans to settle in Indiana were actually the French. So they went up from Canada and it went swooping down. If I had my map, I'd kind of show you. It swooped down kind of along the Mississippi, and Indiana was part of a French territory. Territory is land that is controlled by an outside government, a government that is not in that space. So the very first part that was controlled by an outside government, what we say controlled, because remember, the native people have been living here for generations before the French. So the French said they controlled Indiana and they were in charge. And they set it up as a territory. So when the French first moved in, it was really hard to live in Indiana. There were no roads. There were no buildings set up there. I mean, there was nothing. And not only that, but not only was there nothing, but there wasn't even like maps or things like that. So like they knew nothing about Indiana. So some of the first settlers of Indiana from French were trappers and traders. So they would trap animals to get their skins, which they used for clothing or many other purposes, food and meat. And then they would either trade with the native people, or they would give it back to the France. They would ship it back to France. To help them do this, the French traveled mostly by waterway, because one of the main reasons they did that is because it was easy to navigate, and you could just stay along a river and you kind of knew where you were going. It also made it easier to move goods, because traveling through a heavy forest would be really hard if you had to pull along all the goods you had. Also, if you were on the waterway, you didn't have to worry about such things as like, just some animals even. So you have to worry about bears, wolves, badgers, foxes, raccoons, and many more animals that were dangerous to humans. Also, being on the water, you can kind of see further in the distance, so it helps you know if unknown weather was coming. The British also were traders. So the French traded with the natives of Indiana, native peoples, the native nations, and also the British started moving in, but they didn't come down from Canada. They kind of came across from like Ohio and those states. And when the British came, they actually had more goods, and furs were usually cheaper to trade with than the French. So the French charged a higher price. And so this led to some uneasy times between the French and the British because they were competitors. They were kind of like enemies at the time. And it put the native people in a hard spot because they were in the middle. And that is where I'm going to have you take over. You're going to read about the growing conflict in Indiana. It'll be on page 46 and 47 of your social studies book. And then I just want you to answer a few questions on the growing conflict that was happening in Indiana. So this is going to be the start of us talking about Europeans coming in and kind of what we call Indiana history, even though you and I both know now that there's been thousands and thousands of years of history in Indiana, not just what the Europeans wrote down. So that is it for today's vlog. Sweet and short. Just kind of introducing Europeans coming into Indiana and what they first once did, mostly trappers and traders. And you're going to read how that led to a growing conflict. I will see you in the next vlog.